President Barroso, lovely to see you. And it's been a glorious day in Florence. And in this fantastic setting, the closure of today's conference is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's indeed a gorgeous day in Florence, and I'm so pleased to be here with you. Let me say thank you to the European University Institute, to President Josep Borrell, also to the President of the city, to Sindaco Matteo Renzi. Signore e signori, thank you very much for welcoming me. And I'd like to say it's indeed important to be with you this Europe Day here in Florence, because we are gathered in the most appropriate place to inspire us. We are here in the Palazzo Vecchio, in the heart of the Florentine culture. We are here in Florence, in the cradle of the Renaissance. We are here in Italy, a founding country of the European community, which remains a front-runner of European action and commitment. We are indeed in a highly symbolic place for contemplating the future of the European Union on Europe Day. First, at a time when the so-called decline of Europe is widely discussed in Europe and beyond, I think it is appropriate to remind us, this place, that decline and renewal are two of the greatest themes of our European culture and history. We have been a continent of wars and dictatorships, a continent of divisions and oppression, a continent of Europeans led by hatred and narrow national interests. And we have been a continent of constant renewals, a continent of cooperation and freedom, of openness to dissemination of ideas and trade with others. A continent of Europeans led by their thirst for learning and knowledge, confident in the potential of mankind, ready to challenge accepted orthodoxy and to seek progress. And this place is also a place to remind us of the vital importance of institutions for ideas to be turned into lasting realities. For centuries, intellectuals have dreamt of a peaceful, unified Europe. For centuries, this dream has been thwarted by the forces of narrow nationalism and wars. And finally, our community and our union is born out of the devastating experience of two world wars, backed by the firm political will and determination of our founding fathers. And what is unique in this process is the combination of economic integration with supranational institutions. In the European Union, we have institutions of an innovative supranational nature: the democratically elected European Parliament, the Commission, the European Court of Justice, the European Central Bank, and also the Court of Auditors. It is precisely these supranational institutions that are the best guarantee for the respect of the great principles and rules in a union of sovereign states, a union based in the respect of law. And thanks to this unique institutional arrangement, the European Union has been able to cope with crises and emerge from them stronger. In little more than half a century, we grew from 6 to 27 member states, very soon 28. And today our union is one of the most highly developed regions in the world, with a population of around 500 million. It is a single dynamic market based on the free circulation of goods, capital, services and people. It has a single currency, the euro, which in just a few years has become the second reserve currency in the world. It is the leading trading power in the world, the second largest source of foreign direct investment. The European Union is the world's #1 donor of development aid. In a nutshell, it is an active economic and political player with growing regional and global interests and responsibilities. This is a considerable acquis that should not be underestimated. Yes, we know we are now faced with great difficulties, and we are not complacent with those difficulties, but we should know and remember where we come from, where we were 60 years or 62 years before, and how small the European Union was, how divided Europe was, that most of Europe was living under totalitarian rule or dictatorships. And now, yes, we know that we have difficulties, but we have the instruments, if there is the political will, to overcome those difficulties. As I said in the State of the Union address I delivered in the European Parliament in September, we are probably facing the most serious crisis since the beginning of the European integration. But we have to look at things in perspective. We have indeed to remember where we started from. The reality is that only by sticking all together, we have the dimension and the capabilities to overcome the current difficulties. In today's 21st century world, size matters more than ever. In today's 21st century world, even the biggest of our member states does not have the dimension to deal on equal footing with countries of hundreds of millions of inhabitants, in some cases even more than 1 billion of inhabitants. It is absolutely important to understand that we are in the 21st century and that the paradigm has shifted dramatically, not only geoeconomically, but also geopolitically, and that only acting together, the member states have the leverage to defend their interests and to protect their values. It is only by acting together in the European Union that we'll have the relevant dimension and a greater say in today's world. There are, in fact, 3 big economic poles in the world: United States, China, and Europe. Others may also develop. But basically, these are the 3 great powers of the first half of the 21st century. And the point is, if we want to keep this influence in the world, or if you want to become irrelevant, it's obvious that acting in a non-organized, in a non-structured, in a divided way, we simply will not have the means to defend our interests. But it is also by remaining open to the world that we'll be able to bring more prosperity to Europe. That is why I have called for a European renewal building on our acquis, adapting it to the new geopolitical and geoeconomic realities. And indeed, today we are gathered in the most appropriate place to remind us that renewal and survival and growth against the odds are not things Europeans are merely capable of. In fact, this capacity to reinvent itself is in our historical, cultural, and institutional DNA. It has been part of the history of Europe since centuries. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the fact is that we are showing the way out of the crisis. At the same time, we are building a sustainable, inclusive, and competitive social market economy for the 21st century. I know that some critics argue that Europe is doing too little and too late. I'm going to be very frank, as always. There is no doubt that the European Commission would have preferred bolder and quicker decisions. If you look at the positions took by the European Commission since the beginning of the sovereign crisis, in fact, we had the first meeting precisely 2 years ago. It was a Sunday, 9th of May, 2010. The European Commission has argued in favor of more integrated solutions and responses. For instance, the Eurobonds. It was mentioned to our member states. But we should understand, and this is something that sometimes some of our critics underestimate, that the Union works on the basis of compromise among 27 member states and, in the euro area, 17 member states. So yes, it's true. It takes time to reach agreement, but it is worth it. I will not replace our democratic system by another system because it will be more efficient. This is the time needed for a genuine democratic process. And democracy, I think, is the only acceptable way to organize our societies. And again, let's look at things in perspective. Coming sometimes from very different positions because of the different situation of our member states, we have been able to reach a consensus on the necessity to foster European integration, to resist the crisis, and to lay the foundations for a more structural response. The reality is that over these last 2 years, member states have agreed on an unprecedented level of integration that was simply unthinkable a few years ago. Never in the past so many competences have been exercised at European Union level. And why? Because to build tomorrow's Europe, we must draw the lessons of our interdependence, and member states have become more than ever acutely aware of the high degree of their interdependence, not only in the euro area, but certainly in the euro area. So it is interesting to note the contradiction between what sometimes is the discourse and also the general mood, and what are in fact the real decisions. All the decisions taken since the beginning of the crisis have been for more, not less integration. All the decisions have been to create more European instruments, to create a more integrated European approach, and not to undo what we have as European Union achieved already. And allow me to remind you that early on the Commission has front-loaded all the issues that have dominated the European agenda over the last 2 years, and issues that in fact will continue to dominate it for the years to come, from better economic governance and regulation of financial markets to supervision of fiscal policies, from the Europe 2020 strategy for growth and jobs to our proposals for the next European budget, 2014-2020, that should be seen as a budget for growth and investment, not for Brussels, but for our citizens, for our regions, for our universities, for our workers, because it is a budget for investment, and also a budget that we would like to have as a way of reinforcing cohesion, economic, social, and territorial cohesion in our union. One of the proposals we've made, that I know it's controversial, but I think it makes sense, is precisely the financial transaction tax. That can be a way of reducing the national contributions of member states to this common budget. Of course, what is now important is to restore the growth potential for Europe, so that Europe can become, once again, fully competitive on the global stage, and to create jobs and ensure the well-being of our citizens. But it is also about fairness, about delivering social and territorial cohesion. It's about a union where competitiveness and social justice go hand in hand. It is also about drawing the right lessons from the crisis. And our challenge is how to combine fiscal consolidation and convergence, how to combine stability and growth, how to combine, finally, responsibility and solidarity. As I've said, once again, in the speech I've mentioned in September last year, it's not a question of either or. We need both. It's not a question of saying, shall we go for fiscal consolidation or for investment? We need fiscal consolidation and we need investment. It's a question of combining and, of course, fine-tuning, finding the right policy mix for each member state, because the reality is that the situations are very diverse between our 27 member states. Ladies and gentlemen, the crisis has made crystal clear that more discipline and convergence is a prerequisite to achieve sustainable growth, which is critical for employment and well-being of citizens. That is why we have now a reinforced and more rigorous European economic governance with the so-called six-pack, 6 legislative measures that the Commission has put forward and that were approved by the Council and by the European Parliament. And those legislative measures, they reinforce the Stability and Growth Pact and widen surveillance beyond budgetary policy to cover macroeconomic imbalances. And earlier this year, the signature of the Treaty on Stability, Coordination and Growth, what is usually called the Fiscal Compact, by 25 member states was a further sign of the commitment to discipline and convergence. This was not, as some of you know, the Commission's preferred mechanism due to its intergovernmental nature. But it is a strong political message about the commitment to the euro, that it is not just the currency of the 17 members of the euro area, but the currency of the European Union. Secondly, the crisis has also made clear that to go on building Europe through concrete achievements, solidarity and responsibility have to be the two sides of the same coin. That is why we now have in the European Union an underlying political contract linking together responsibility and solidarity. Those who can do it undertake an effort of solidarity to others. And those who are in difficulties do not take this just as an entitlement, but should undertake an effort of reform. It is on this contract that the European Stability Mechanism is based, but also, for instance, our proposals for the next budget. We are replacing what I call the culture of entitlement with a focus on reforms and results. So it's not just words, responsibility and solidarity. These are the principles that underlie this political contract that we can find in the European Stability Mechanism, that we can find in the European budget, and that we can find in many other of our policies. Thirdly, the crisis has emphasized that growth and stability should go hand in hand. A country cannot have sustainable economic growth and jobs creation, nor sustainable social welfare, if its public debt continues to spiral out of control. That is why Member States are now engaged in very courageous efforts of fiscal consolidation. But from the very beginning, the Commission has kept saying that apart from fiscal consolidation, it is important to create conditions for sustainable growth. And once again, the name growth is important, but also the adjective sustainable, because it is very easy to create artificial growth that will only create more difficulties in the future. We have seen what are the results of growth fueled by irresponsible behavior in the financial sector or irresponsible public debt. The reality is that to regain competitiveness, several member states need to make structural reforms that are difficult to implement. The reform of the labor market, better conditions for business, adapt their tax law to make them more employment-friendly, for instance. And this is unavoidable. The reality is that Europe as a whole has not a problem of competitiveness. If you look at the share of the European Union in global trade, we are keeping our position in the last years. If you consider the external trade of the European Union, out of energy and raw materials, we are balanced. So Europe is competitive. By the way, we have kept a share of the global market that was not possible for the United States, that have reduced it. The problem is afterwards when you look at the difference between member states. Some of our member states, in fact, lost a great part of the share. They have a real problem of competitiveness. Others, typically Germany, have in fact gained a lot from this global relationship. And in fact, it is Germany, the export industry of Germany, that is keeping the overall balance, and other countries, namely the Netherlands. But this is how the European Union works. You should understand that it cannot have a simplistic analysis about competitiveness in Europe. We have to see the different situations. This is why we have to look to the causes of the imbalances, and at the heart of it, it is a problem of competitiveness. This is why we should not make the choice between consolidation and growth. The choice, in fact, is between unsustainable short-term stimulus that will lead to a short-living relaunch of growth, or sustainable long-term reforms that will make a difference over time. And our choice is very clear. It is about investing in sustainable, lasting growth while immediately addressing the most urgent issues. And of course, first of all, unemployment that has reached intolerable rates, namely in the young population of many of our member states. These are not just words, these are concerns and also actions that we have not discovered today. We have already been working for some time on ensuring that the structural funds are more focused on growth and job creation. For 2012 and 2013, we have proposed to relocate some of the structural funds to support youth training and employment, as well as SMEs that are indeed the backbone of Europe's economy. For example, here in Italy, last December, we have agreed with Italian authorities to reprogram close to 4 billion euros of European funds, particularly towards education and employment. So it is possible to do it if the governments want to do it. And it's possible to do it in a very short time if they want to redeploy the structural funds for areas where we can have real results and value added. And we are determined to pursue this course of action, as illustrated by our proposals for the next EU budget, which include a strong focus on better targeting the EU structural funds on competitiveness and convergence. Fourthly, the crisis underlined that a well-functioning and transparent financial sector is a key condition for lasting and sustainable growth and employment. And we are now making Europe the first region in the world to have top-notch financial supervision and regulation that is up to the challenges of the future. We are indeed replacing what was until now a system of national regulation that we have seen did not work. Let's not forget that all the strange behaviors we have now identified in the financial sector should have been identified by national regulators and supervisors, and they simply were not anticipated. Only now, the European Union has been accepting the idea that we should have some kind of pan-European system of fiscal supervision, but also financial supervision, of course, coordinating the efforts of national supervisors. Last but not least, the crisis has made clear, as I've said earlier, that the real core issue is competitiveness, namely among member states. That is why, right on taking the second mandate of the Commission I have the honor to chair, I have presented a European agenda for growth and jobs, the Europe 2020 strategy for smart, inclusive, sustainable growth. Better coordination of our economic policies and the long overdue structural reforms are the centerpiece of this strategy. And that strategy has been unanimously accepted by the member states and endorsed by the European Parliament. But agreeing the strategy was the easier part. What it is important is to work all together on its delivery, year after year. And as I said in the last European Council, the reality is that very often in Europe we have an implementation gap. There are decisions taken by the European Council, heads of state and government, but they take too long afterwards to be, in fact, implemented in the reality of our Stability and Growth Pact, and widen surveillance beyond budgetary policy to cover macroeconomic imbalances. And earlier this year, the signature of the Treaty on Stability, Coordination and Growth, what is usually called the Fiscal Compact, by 25 member states was a further sign of the commitment to discipline and convergence. This was not, as some of you know, the Commission's preferred mechanism due to its intergovernmental nature. But it is a strong political message about the commitment to the euro that it is not just the currency of the 17 members of the euro area, but the currency of the European Union. Secondly, the crisis has also made clear that to go on building Europe through concrete achievements, solidarity and responsibility have to be the two sides of the same coin. That is why we now have in the European Union an underlying political contract linking together responsibility and solidarity. Those who can do it undertake an effort of solidarity to others. And those who are in difficulties do not take this just as an entitlement, but should undertake an effort of reform. It is on this contract that the European Stability Mechanism is based, but also, for instance, our proposals for the next budget. We are replacing what I call the culture of entitlement with a focus on reforms and results. So it's not just words, responsibility and solidarity. These are the principles that underlie this political contract that we can find in the European Stability Mechanism, that we can find in the European budget, and that we can find in many other of our policies. Thirdly, the crisis has emphasized that growth and stability should go hand in hand. A country cannot have sustainable economic growth and jobs creation, nor sustainable social welfare, if its public debt continues to spiral out of control. That is why member states are now engaged in very courageous efforts of fiscal consolidation. But from the very beginning, the Commission has kept saying that apart from fiscal consolidation, it is important to create conditions for sustainable growth. And once again, the name growth is important, but also the adjective sustainable, because it is very easy to create artificial growth that will only create more difficulties in the future. We have seen what are the results of growth fueled by irresponsible behavior in the financial sector or irresponsible public debt. The reality is that to regain competitiveness, several member states need to make structural reforms that are difficult to implement. The reform of the labor market, better conditions for business, adapt their tax law to make them more employment-friendly, for instance. And this is unavoidable. The reality is that Europe as a whole has not a problem of competitiveness. If you look at the share of the European Union in global trade, we are keeping our position in the last years. If you consider the external trade of the European Union, out of energy and raw materials, we are balanced. So Europe is competitive. By the way, we have kept a share of the global market that was not possible for the United States, that have reduced it. The problem is afterwards when you look at the difference between member states. Some of our member states, in fact, lost a great part of the share. They have a real problem of competitiveness. Others, typically Germany, have in fact gained a lot from this global relationship. And in fact, it is Germany, the export industry of Germany, that is keeping the overall balance, and other countries, namely the Netherlands. But this is how the European Union works. You should understand that it cannot have a simplistic analysis about competitiveness in Europe. We have to see the different situations. This is why we have to look to the causes of the imbalances, and at the heart of it, it is a problem of competitiveness. This is why we should not make the choice between consolidation and growth. The choice, in fact, is between unsustainable short-term stimulus that will lead to a short-living relaunch of growth, or sustainable long-term reforms that will make a difference over time. And our choice is very clear. It is about investing in sustainable, lasting growth while immediately addressing the most urgent issues. And of course, first of all, unemployment that has reached intolerable rates, namely in the young population of many of our member states. These are not just words, these are concerns and also actions that we have not discovered today. We have already been working for some time on ensuring that the structural funds are more focused on growth and job creation. For 2012 and 2013, we have proposed to relocate some of the structural funds to support youth training and employment, as well as SMEs that are indeed the backbone of Europe's economy. For example, here in Italy, last December, we have agreed with Italian authorities to reprogram close to 4 billion euros of European funds, particularly towards education and employment. So it is possible to do it if the governments want to do it. And it's possible to do it in a very short time if they want to redeploy the structural funds for areas where we can have real results and value added. And we are determined to pursue this course of action, as illustrated by our proposals for the next EU budget, which include a strong focus on better targeting the EU structural funds on competitiveness and convergence. Fourthly, the crisis underlined that a well-functioning and transparent financial sector is a key condition for lasting and sustainable growth and employment. And we are now making Europe the first region in the world to have top-notch financial supervision and regulation that is up to the challenges of the future. We are indeed replacing what was until now a system of national regulation that we have seen did not work. Let's not forget that all the strange behaviors we have now identified in the financial sector should have been identified by national regulators and supervisors, and they simply were not anticipated. Only now, the European Union has been accepting the idea that we should have some kind of pan-European system of fiscal supervision, but also financial supervision, of course, coordinating the efforts of national supervisors. Last but not least, the crisis has made clear, as I've said earlier, that the real core issue is competitiveness. Namely, among member states. That is why, right on taking the second mandate of the Commission I have the honor to chair, I have presented a European agenda for growth and jobs, the Europe 2020 strategy for smart, inclusive, sustainable growth. Better coordination of our economic policies and the long overdue structural reforms are the centerpiece of this strategy. And that strategy has been unanimously accepted by the member states and endorsed by the European Parliament. But agreeing the strategy was the easier part. What it is important is to work all together on its delivery, year after year. And as I said in the last European Council, the reality is that very often in Europe we have an implementation gap. There are decisions taken by the European Council, heads of state and government, but they take too long afterwards to be, in fact, implemented in the reality of our member states. Typically, the case is some regulations regarding the single market, where the transposition of directives takes very often too long. But also, the good news is that now member states are more aware of this, and in fact, we are changing the mindset, the culture of some of our member states, because now they are accepting to front-load these implementation efforts. I think it's now time to show, in implementing our growth agenda, the same speed and determination that was shown in fiscal consolidation. In the recent years, there was an awareness of the need for fiscal consolidation. I would like now to see the member states with some determination also for the growth-enhancing measures, for instance, to complete the single market. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, at European level, growth will be coming from three key sources. First, from the deepening of the single market, if member states are ready to eliminate the remaining barriers, particularly in the energy, digital, and services sector. The reality is that in Europe we have a common market for goods, but we don't have yet a common market for services. And we don't have yet a digital common market. And I don't need to tell you that in the future the market will be mainly digital. Another source for growth is global trade. I know that in times of crisis there is the temptation to close the doors, but that will be self-defeating for Europe to turn inwards. We are the biggest trading bloc in the world, even with all the difficulties that we are facing. And we need to have greater access to external markets. Finally, apart from the internal market and structural reforms and the global trade, we need investment, targeted investment, also on a European scale. Investment in research and innovation, in education, and also investments in energy, transport, and digital infrastructure to better connect Europe and tap the potential, the full potential of our single market. And why, some people may ask, but why do you need it at European level? Why not leave it for member states? For a very simple reason that now experience can confirm. If we don't have that investment at European level, member states will not give priority for the interconnections that are transnational, either in transport or sustainable energy or in the digital agenda. And in fact, we will not reap all the benefit of the internal market. If you compare Europe with the United States, this is one of the differences, is that in the United States, when a company, may it be a very small startup, makes that project immediately their reference is the whole market of the United States and sometimes also of the world afterwards. But in Europe, we still have a lot of barriers that prevent us from using the potential of the single market, including the lack of infrastructure in some matters, for instance, in terms of energy, where the markets are very fragmented. Now the heads of state and government accepted to commit to 2015 as the target for the internal market for energy. This is important, but it should be done and implemented in practice. That is why also the Commission proposed for the next budget what we have called Connecting Europe Facility. We have also proposed to use project bonds to support such key strategic investments by attracting private sector investments and working with the European Investment Bank. This proposal was made in September last year. I'm now seeing many people saying the same. I think in politics, plagiarism is a compliment. Because in fact, those proposals are already on the table. The project bonds, there is a proposal, a legislation proposal that is on the table of the European Council, the Council, and the Parliament. There was a trilogue, as we say, 2 days ago. So instead of discussing it, just do it. Just approve it. The instruments are there. The proposal for the reinforcement of the capital base of the EIB was also made last September. At that time, member states were not able to agree. And of course, the European Investment Bank, that has to follow also the constraints of the market, has not been acting with the same level of volume that before, namely to support SMEs. But if the member states accept to increase its capital base, it is possible to do more for the real economy. That is why the lending capacity of the EIB should be increased. And we are ready to increase structural fund support for EIB-managed projects that support SMEs, research and innovation, and in the energy sector as well. To sum up, ladies and gentlemen, let me say clearly that whenever I hear or read about what we should be doing for a brighter European future and for growth, it often comes down to implement what is already decided or what is now on the table of the member states or of the European institutions. And this is the reality. Instead of trying to rediscover the wheel every time, what we have to do now is to be coherent, consistent over time, and in a determined way, implement our common decisions. And today on Europe Day, I want to call on all European stakeholders to step up their efforts for growth by accelerating the delivery of Europe 2020 strategy, which is also a good platform for any new growth initiatives. And I call on all European leaders to promote, through an increased sense of responsibility and solidarity, stability and growth at European level. And for growth to happen, we need fiscal consolidation, structural reform, and investment. It's not just fiscal consolidation. It's not just investment. It is fiscal consolidation, structural reform, and investment. That's why the Commission has proposed a pro-growth budget for 2013 and 2014-2020. And we have tabled legislative and other proposals that can start delivering growth now, with some quick results if there is a commitment to do it. So I call on member states to support us in making the next breaking news by showing their political will to decide now on these proposals and to fully implement with determination and vigor what has already been discussed. This is the best way to create a real breakthrough from the economic and social well-being of our citizens. To conclude, I'd like to say that as we are building a union able to withstand all weathers, we need Europeans for all seasons. I know that most, if not all of you, are committed supporters of the European integration. Let me be very frank. It is easy to be pro-European when the weather is fine, when everything is going well. It is now, where there are difficulties, that I would like to see who are the real Europeans committed to our common values and our common project. And let me tell you that I believe that more dangerous than the anti-European positions of opponents to European integration is the pessimism of the supporters of the European process. The real problem for Europe is not Euroscepticism. That can be, in fact, a way of stimulating our project. The real problem is the depressive attitude of the pro-Europeans. There is in Europe today what I've called the intellectual glamour of pessimism. This is a self-defeating attitude. Of course, we should not be complacent about the gravity of the situation, and I think we are not when we have signaled our difficulties. But we should also be realistic about the achievements and capacities of Europe. What we need more than anything else is leadership and ownership of the process. Ownership at all levels. This is essential to restore confidence and to promote Europe's growth and prosperity. We have to work all of us together because Europe is, of course, much more than Brussels. Europe is 27 member states with their regions, with their cities. Europe is also Italy, Tuscany, and Florence. Europe is not just institutions and processes or procedures and governments. Europe is 500 million Europeans. Yes, Europe is all of us, and all of us together, I think we can overcome these difficulties. But frankly, and I think we should discuss this politically, when we see some of the politicians that take decisions in Brussels and afterwards go to their countries and they say, these decisions are not mine, they are imposed to me by Brussels, we have here a real problem of leadership. Because this is the real key issue for leadership and ownership. All the decisions regarding the euro area have been decided unanimously by the euro area member states. They were not an imposition of the European Commission or the Central Bank. They were decided by all the elected leaders of the European Union. So it is very important to understand in the political debate that the European Union is not a foreign policy. It's not a foreign power that comes to our countries. The European Union is what we together make of it. When I say we, I mean the European institutions, certainly, the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European Central Bank, but also the heads of state and government and our governments. And what happens sometimes, as we have seen in the political discourse, is that some of the politicians at national level, when things go well, they say it's their merit. When things go wrong, they say it's the fault of Brussels. And afterwards, they are very astonished to say that Europe is not very popular. How could it be? If there is not a commitment of the leaders, namely of the mainstream political forces, to have the courage to explain what's going on and not to give up to any attempt of populism or extremism, because we know in the past what was the cost for Europe of all forms of populism and narrow nationalism. That's why I think this crisis has, in fact, a potential for a change of minds. That's why I believe that with leadership and ownership of our process, not just for the political leaders, but also for our societies, like, for instance, what we are doing here, and thank you to Florence, to have this kind of initiative, our universities, our organizations at all levels. I believe that with ownership and leadership, Europe will be stronger and fit for the challenges of the 21st century. I thank you for your attention.